Tonight we are covering all of it: the technical, the referee, the offensive structure of the Indiana Fever that should be raising serious questions, and what an 87-78 win over the Los Angeles Sparks actually reveals about where this team is headed in 2026. Because a win can hide things, but it cannot hide everything. Not here. With 20 seconds left in the first half, Clark was whistled for an offensive foul. Debatable, yes, but it happens. That is basketball, and Clark knew it. What she would not accept quietly was the moment itself, dominant, in command, carrying her team on a night she was clearly the best player on the floor, being undercut by a call she believed was wrong. So she did what every professional athlete does in that situation. She walked to the official, clapped, raised her voice, and made her point. Here is the part that matters. The referee initially let it go. He heard her. He processed it. He decided it did not cross the line. Then he changed his mind. In the final seconds before halftime, after Clark kept talking, which, again, players do every single night in professional basketball without getting a technical, he reversed course. The official's name is Jason Alabanza, and that call will follow this story for a long time. Indiana still 187-78. Clark still finished with 20 points and 8 assists. But at Simply Explained, we do not let things slide just because the scoreboard went the right way. Clark now has 9 technical fouls across her WNBA career, 6 in her rookie season, 2 in an injury short in 2025, and now 1 to open 2026. 9 career technicals is not a trivial number. But the more important question is not how many she has accumulated. It is who is calling them, under what circumstances, and whether the threshold being applied to her is the same threshold applied to every other player in this league. Because the evidence strongly suggests it is not. Clark's frustration with officials does not come from nothing. It comes from 2 years of documented evidence that the physical contact she absorbs on the basketball court does not consistently generate the foul calls that the same contact against another player would generate. Broadcasters have said it. Reporters across major outlets have written it. Clark herself has addressed it repeatedly in post-game settings, always carefully worded, always measured, always in the language of someone who knows she will be scrutinized for every syllable. And yet here we are in 2026, watching her receive a technical foul for telling a referee to do his job. The player who arguably receives the least favorable foul-calling treatment relative to the contact she absorbs is simultaneously the player who gets penalized for vocally protesting it. That is not a coincidence. That is a dynamic. And it has been a dynamic for 2 full years. If you think this is purely about basketball, you are not seeing the full picture. Under the WNBA's new collective bargaining agreement, which took effect this season, the salary cap has climbed to $7 million, up from $1.5 million just 1 year ago. Individual player minimums have jumped from $66,000 to $270,000. That is a seismic correction that was long overdue, but with higher salaries comes a revised fine structure. Technical fouls now carry a $500 penalty each for the first 3 offenses. Compare that to 2025, when Clark, sitting injured in street clothes watching her team compete in the playoffs, posted "Refs couldn't stop us" on social media. The league fined her $200 for that tweet. She responded with laughing emojis. She got fined for a celebration post. The financial stakes on every one of these officiating interactions have now more than doubled. But the accountability mechanisms on the other side, the transparency around referee assignments, the processes by which problematic patterns get reviewed and addressed, none of that has publicly evolved in any way that matches the commercial growth of this league. And that gap is a problem. Now let us talk about the actual game, because there is a story here just as important as the officiating conversation. Clark's shooting line from 3-point range was 1 of 7. 1 of 7. That is a brutal number from the most decorated long-range shooter in the history of women's collegiate basketball. The lazy take is to say she had a rough shooting night and move on. We are not doing the lazy take. When you watch this offense carefully, when you look at what plays are being designed for which players, who is being systematically set up for high-quality looks versus who is being asked to create their own shot in contested situations. A very different picture emerges. Kelsey Mitchell is elite. Nobody is disputing that. In 2025, she averaged 20.2 points per game, shot nearly 46% from the field, and led the entire WNBA in three-pointers made. Exceptional player. But the question tonight was not whether Mitchell can score. The question was whether this offense is designed to maximize Caitlin Clark asterisk, or whether it is structured around Mitchell as the primary scoring option with Clark in a facilitating role around her. The film from this game answers that question clearly, and it leans heavily toward the latter. Mitchell had 17 points at halftime, on a volume of shot attempts that was extraordinary relative to her teammate who, last anyone checked, is the most marketable player in the history of women's professional basketball. The box score will not tell you which plays were designed to create which looks. It will not tell you who had the offense run through them versus who was finding opportunities within the flow. Film does, and the film shows a systemic imbalance in how opportunities are being distributed, to be fair, and fairness matters here. Mitchell is not the problem. Stephanie White has assembled something that looks like a genuine title contender, and the three-headed attack of Clark, Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston, when it is operating correctly, is devastating. The issue is what happens after Clark distributes. She kicks it out, she creates the look, she makes the read, and then the ball does not come back. The reintegration of Clark as a scoring option after she facilitates has been inconsistently present, and that inconsistency is the difference between a 25-point night and a 20-point night where 1 of 7 from 3 makes it look like she struggled. She did not struggle. She was not in rhythm because this offense is not yet fully calibrated to put her in rhythm. That is a critical distinction. Before we close on the technical foul story, there is one piece of historical context that does not get enough attention. In her rookie season, Clark came within one technical foul of a one-game suspension. Think about that carefully. A first-year professional, never having played at this level before, accumulated 6 technical fouls, one short of a suspension. That is not a story about a player with a discipline problem. That is a story about an officiating environment applying a standard to her that generated an extraordinary number of calls for a player who is still finding her footing. We are now in her 3rd professional season. The pattern has not been addressed, and now we are watching a referee let an interaction go once, reverse that decision, and issue a technical against a player who was dominating the game. Whatever is driving this dynamic, nobody has fixed it. Clark scored 7 points in the first 2 minutes, 3 assists in the first quarter alone. She closed the half with 11 points and 6 assists without hitting a single three-pointer, and still looked like the most impactful player on the floor. Indiana closed the second quarter on an 18-5 run. An 18-5 run. That is what this team is capable of when everything clicks. On the night, she finished 20 points and 8 assists, navigating a game where her perimeter shot was absent by getting into the paint, finishing through contact, and creating scoring opportunities through driving and interior work. That was not a regular feature of her game in previous seasons. A Caitlin Clark who can beat you off the dribble asterisk and from three-point range is a categorically different offensive problem than a Clark who is primarily a perimeter threat. That interior dimension emerging in 2026 might be the most interesting developmental story in the WNBA right now. The positives deserve acknowledgement alongside the critique. Indiana shot 87% from the free throw line, excellent basketball, the kind of efficiency that compounds over a long season and holds up when games tighten in the fourth quarter. They out-rebounded Los Angeles by 7. The physicality and effort metrics were meaningfully better than the season-opening loss to Dallas showed, but Indiana also turned the ball over 16 times. 16. The only reason it did not cost them the game is that the Sparks matched that carelessness with 19 turnovers of their own. That is not a formula you can count on. Against a disciplined, well-coached team, 16 turnovers becomes a double-digit loss. That number needs to come down as the competition level rises. There is no version of this team's championship ceiling that includes a 16-turnover average. The technical foul against Jason Alabanza is not a story about Caitlin Clark losing control. It is a story about a player who has been absorbing physical punishment and officiating frustration for 2+ professional seasons, reaching a visible breaking point at the exact moment when it felt most absurd, because she was dominating the game and somehow still on the wrong end of a questionable call. The WNBA is in a period of historic growth. The salary cap this season is $7 million. Player salaries that were unconscionably low for the entire history of this league have been corrected. The commercial profile of women's professional basketball is at an all-time high, driven in significant part by the attention Clark generated when she arrived as a rookie. This is the moment when the infrastructure of the league, including officiating accountability and transparency, needs to grow to match that reality. You cannot have your most commercially significant player at the center of recurring, documented officiating controversies and respond with silence. The fans see it. They always see it. The win was real. 87-78, 20 points and 8 assists were real. And every question raised tonight about this offense, about these officials, about this league, is equally real.